today's our HubSco Plus training. If you're unfamiliar with HubSco, it is a system that is designed for local governments to be able to report on building construction spending um, and their hub spend that they do on those projects. And we'll go into what projects need to be covered. HubSco was the original system that we had. It actually started in 2023. Was retired in 2020, or no, it started in 2003. It lasted for 20 years, so it was retired in 2023, and HubSco Plus took its place. It has a lot of the same look, a lot of the same features. We wanted to keep the name and the brand um, consistent so we wouldn't confuse people who had been using it for a long time. But we appreciate everybody coming in today. Here's what we're going to be talking about. We'll do an overview of Hub requirements. We'll talk about HubSco Plus features, how to log into HubSco Plus, navigating in HubSco Plus. We'll look at adding formal and informal projects and how to run quarterly reports. So, what is a hub? Uh, a historically underutilized businesses. This is defined in General Statute 143, 128.4. It says at least 51% of the business, so it's got to be a for-profit business, is owned by one or more persons who are members of at least one of the groups in 143, 128.4b, and those categories are listed below. Those categories are Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian, female, disabled, and disadvantaged. So those are the categories that individuals would need to be in those categories in order for the firm to be certified. And at least one of those owners must have management and daily business operation control of the business. So they would need to be able to make significant decisions about the company, hiring, firing. We're going after this contract. We're buying this big piece of equipment. We're going to try to acquire this company. We're going to decide to shut down. Any significant decisions, the the owner that is in one of these categories needs to be involved in. And you can have multiple owners, that's fine. And sometimes the owners are all in the same category. Sometimes they are not. We do certify based on the minority categories first. So the Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian. If owners fall into those categories, that is the certification they receive. If not, then we look at gender, and if the 51% or more of the ownership falls into the female category, then that is the certification that they hold. Otherwise, we look at disabled and disadvantaged. So disabled and disadvantaged would typically be Caucasian males that own the company, but they're disabled or they can show disadvantage. We do have a new category that is called Employee Stock Ownership Plan, and that is based on the ownership participants in the plan. It doesn't have a control aspect. It is 51% of the active plan participants, and they'd have to be like employees that are actively working, not retired, not unaffiliated with the company in some other way. They have to be active there uh, in order to count towards the 51%. So that's a new thing. We're still kind of working through how that's going to be put into practice and put into the system so that people can request it and we can process it and approve it. Anybody have any questions about certification? They do last 4 years. Certification is done through the electronic vendor portal system. That is they register with the state and say, we want to do business with the state. And they also fill out the application for Hub in that system. And then they upload required documents in the system to submit to the Hub office. Hub office evaluates it, certifies them if it's appropriate, and their certification lasts for 4 years. They will be shown on the electronic vendor portal vendor search as Hub certified, and 4 years down the line, roughly they'll get a notice, hey, your certification is coming due, and they'll be asked to go ahead and log in so they can recertify. So they can recertify as long as they meet the criteria at this point. So we encourage folks to keep up with that because there are statutes that say you can only count the dollars if they are certified. So if they fall off and they're no longer certified, you cannot count the dollars as hub towards the goals. So looking at our hub construction requirements, their state building projects have a 10% goal for state agencies, community colleges, and public universities. Local governments would have that 10% goal if there's any state funding for the building project, even if it's just $1. It would be a 10% goal, but they do have some flexibility in having a different goal if they go through a process to identify what an appropriate goal is, and they set that up and they document it and they publish that. So if the cost is $300,000 or more and it's paid with local funds only, then the local government establishes that goal. This does include projects done by a private entity on a facility that's to be leased or purchased by the local government. And I do see a question from Sarah. We'll get to that in just a moment. There does need to be a notice and public hearing on the appropriate percentage goal for minority business participation for building projects. And there are some resources about goal setting that the UNC School of Government has they have some guidelines there. Sarah Kirby, you have a question. Or you have your hand up anyway. Do you want to take yourself off mute?
Oh, good morning, everyone. Just a quick question, because obviously most of our construction projects are multi-year projects. What happens when a hub certified contractor drops off being certified, or conversely, if they weren't certified at the beginning of the project, but sometime during the project they become certified? How do we count that?
The HubSco system doesn't really have a great way of being able to distinguish when the certification took place. It's really going to look at it when you enter in the data. So ideally, they should be maintaining the certification for the duration of the project. That should be set as an expectation for them as they're going through. It is their responsibility to do that. It's not a bad thing for the prime or somebody to keep an eye on that. They could even ask for, hey, let us have your certification letter, or they could check on the EVP vendor search to see when their certification ends, so that the prime can encourage the subcontractor, if it's a hub subcontractor, to maintain their certification. It's probably not a bad idea for them to keep an eye on that. Again, HubSco Plus doesn't really have a great way of saying this portion was when they were certified, this portion was not. There is a way you could probably do that, but it would involve more data entry, and I'm not sure that I would suggest that really. I would probably go with what the category is when you are entering the data. It's not perfect, Sarah.
No,
it's not.
I understand that. I do know when I came from the state of Texas, if you were certified at any point in the project, it was counted. I know we don't have that provision, but I mean, I'm just thinking about companies that may have graduated even from their hub certification in the course of performing as a subcontractor.
Yeah, we don't really have a graduation from
It's not
hub
based
to
on the SBA guidelines.
it's only based on ownership and control. It's not based on size. So there's
Okay.
not right now there is not a graduation component in there. The the probably we need to go with is when you're entering the data, it's going to
Basically at the end of the
use,
project, use what numbers are there
yeah, and the system will count if they are hub certified at that time.
at that time.
Um,
Okay.
so it and it's basically whenever you enter that data, if you go in at the beginning of the project and that firm is hub certified and you're like, I'm getting a head start on this. I don't want to wait till the project is done to get my subcontractors in. I want to enter the data right now. It will be based on when you enter them in. And you can go back and you can enter in their total dollar value. It might be a little bit different at the end of the project than it was when you first started, but that certification is still going to be counted as whatever it was at the time you entered them into HubSco.
Okay. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So moving forward, thank you, Sarah, for the question. When we look at HubSco, as I mentioned, HubSco was developed to replace an older system. It was developed by the Hub Office and Department of Information Technology. The original one was developed in partnership with the State Construction Office. So we had Hub, which is the Hub Office. We had SCO, which was State Construction Office. We combined that for that system name. We kept it consistent just so because people were used to seeing HubSco and we didn't want to confuse people who had seen it for years and years and years with a new name. So we kept it as HubSco, even though State Construction Office is not involved in the system. So it's only used by local governments, towns, cities, villages, counties, school systems, any other local government. Community colleges, public universities, and state agencies, they use Interscope, and we will not be covering that in this training. If we do have any community college folks or university folks, you're welcome to sit in and listen on this, but it's not going to help you a whole lot. So if you are a community college, feel free to drop off, and we'll keep moving. So what you need to know about construction reporting, these are the projects that you do need to report. So building projects that are $30,000 total cost or more need to be reported. There's not really in the general statute a definition of what a building is. It's a little bit fuzzy. But typically we think of it as vertical construction. So you are building a structure that people are going to work in, live in. You're going to run a power plant on. It's going to be the power plant. It's going to be a wastewater treatment plant. Those kinds of four walls and a roof structures would be reportable if they're $30,000 or more. It does apply to wastewater treatment systems, wastewater collection systems, water supply systems, water conservation projects. So your grants that you may have for that, typically from Department of Environmental Quality, would typically specify the need to reach out or use minority firms. And so in those cases, those projects would be appropriate to submit in HubSco Plus. So projects that do not need to be reported, prefabricated or relocatable buildings or portions of them do not need to be reported. However, if there's work done on site, that would count and need to be reported if it is more than the $30,000 minimum. You can report at less than $30,000, but I would say don't cherry pick that and say, oh, we did well with Hub on this less than $30,000 project, so we're going to report that. I would say pick a dollar value if you're going less than $30,000 and stick with it. And any project that you do that is that dollar amount or more, report it. So if you say we're going to go down to $15,000, any project $15,000 or more, go ahead and report that. If you're not reporting all of them, then you're skewing the results. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're getting accurate information. Um, the other projects that do not need to be reported in HubSco are street and bridge projects or utility projects. And I'm not talking about the wastewater treatment kinds of things. I'm talking more in terms of cables or electrical, like power generation or power distribution um, for those exceptions. Does anybody have any particular projects that they have questions about that they're not sure if they should be reporting them or not? And I have a couple of examples that I could go through, but I want to see if anybody's got particular burning ideas that they want to know about. Rehab and demolition projects, yes, those would apply because the things that need to be reported are new construction, repair, or renovation. So yeah, if you're demolition projects, if it's solely demolition, I think there actually is an exception for that. But if it's part of a larger project, then I would go ahead and include it because there's plenty of hub firms that are demolition, asbestos, and that sort of firms that do that kind of work, and you'd be losing out some opportunities for hub participation there if you didn't do that. If you're replacing an HVAC, yes, that would be something that would be reportable. Acoustical work in a classroom, um, that might depend a little bit on what you're doing. If all you're doing is replacing tiles, acoustical tiles, uh, that might be a little bit of a gray area. If you have to change the room in some way or shift around the lighting or the electrical, then yes, I would say go ahead and that would be appropriate to have the hub requirements and do uh, reporting on it. Somebody said asphalt paving of a parking lot, amount of $500,000. That one is, I think, would be a decision on your part whether to report that. If it is the only thing that you are doing, if you started a project and it was a totally new building or a major renovation of a school, just for instance, and part of that renovation included clearing some space and putting in some more parking um, spaces, or saying, you know what, the parking lot's been there for a while, it's degraded, we need to um, get it back up to snuff. If it's part of a larger project, I would definitely include that. There are absolutely hubs that do asphalt paving and striping that could participate on those projects. So I would say, seek them out. You can make the decision if the only thing you're doing is parking lot and it's not associated with another building. You can make that decision or whether to um, report or not. I would say replacement of an HVAC chiller would be the same as replacement or of an HVAC. And yes, I would include that for reporting. Um, and somebody asked, any of the things that you're discussing will still need to be $30,000 or more. And that is correct. Yeah. Any of the projects, and that's total cost of the project, $30,000 or more. When we're talking about the exception for relocatable buildings, and I think of like a construction trailer or a temporary classroom, which sometimes those tend to be more than temporary. Um, but if there's enough work that you need to do on site, whether it's for plumbing or electrical, or grading the site, making sure that it's stable, and that work gets over $30,000, and you'd probably need to know in your estimate beforehand that you need to reach out to hub vendors. I would say yes, you would need to report that in HubSco. I hope I got all the questions that were asked about those. Just I do want to say rehab repair, renovation, new construction are all appropriate and should be, you should be seeking out minority participation, hub participation, and reporting on it as long as it's $30,000 or more. Okay, so moving on. Reporting due dates. These are consistent. I typically say these don't change from year to year. These are always the same. It's always 10 days after the quarter ends, whether that's a Saturday, Sunday, holiday. They're consistent from year to year. So get them on your calendar and get the reports in early. It can be a little bit stressful if you just start entering your data on, say, the second quarter for right now is October through December 31st, and the report is due January 10th. If you wait till you come back from the Christmas holiday to enter in your data, that's going to be really stressful because you've got New Year's there, so you lose a day there, and there's at least one weekend between when you come back and when the report is due. So that could be a really stressful way to come back from the holiday. So we encourage you to get started early. And as soon as you know something about the project, you can go in and get it started and set up. You can start a project without necessarily knowing all the subcontractors. So we'll show you that as we go through here. But the next report is due January 10th. We do send reminders through Hubsco every quarter, and you usually get 2 notices about those coming up. We have experienced a couple of folks who have received multiple emails about the same notice, and we are looking into that. I think we know why we're seeing that, and we're trying to make sure that people aren't getting a duplicate email. We want to make sure that the messages that are sent out are not ignored because people think, oh, this one again, it's just a duplicate. I don't need to pay attention to it. So we're trying to make sure that what is sent out is worth reading. The dates are always available on the Hub Office website under the Hub Construction Expenditure Reporting section. And the link is in the PDF that we sent out. So construction reporting good faith efforts. There are good faith efforts that depend on the size of the project as to who needs to do them. If it's an informal project, this is the $30,000 up to $300,000, unless you're treating it as a formal project. If you advertise it publicly and require people to submit good faith effort affidavits, just treat it as a formal project. So that will be requirements of if you're doing just an informal project, you're just reaching out to folks and saying, hey, can you give me a quote? Then you need to follow these requirements. So this is from General Statute 143-131, and it's all public entities shall. And when it says shall, that means you got to do it. It doesn't mean if you want to, or we didn't get around to it, or we don't have time. It says shall, so that means you got to do it. Shall, must, all those things are those required things that you can't skip. So shall solicit minority participation in contracts for erection, construction, alteration, or repair of any building. So that's where we come to, like, it's a new building, it's repair, it's renovation, it's rehab. That's where we get this to say, yeah, you should be counting those. You need to maintain a record of all of contractors solicited. That's not just Hub contractors, that's all contractors that you solicit. However you do that, if you pick up a phone, have a phone log of that. If you send out an email, have a copy of the email. If you did a blind copy to people that you sent that out, have the list of who you sent it out to and what their emails are handy. So, if somebody says, well, that's great that you've got this email, but it doesn't show me who it went to, it's a little bit better if you can see the email in the the record that you have in your sent mailbox. But if you at least have the list of people that you had intended to send it to, and if I mean, I don't know that you have to do this, but you could have like a date next to it that says this is when we sent this email out to them. Um, you need to document your efforts to recruit minority business participation in those contracts. So if you did a phone call, if you sent an email, you need to um, keep track of that. If you posted it on your website, this statute doesn't require you to formally advertise for bids. Um, but theoretically, you could put it on your website and say this is an informal project. I'm not sure exactly why you would do that, but just talking theoretically, somebody might do that. So any way that you are reaching out to hub vendors or vendors in general to invite them, you need to keep track of that and document what you did. And then the fourth part of this is report all the data and documentation of efforts to recruit minority participation to the hub office upon completion of the project. And you do that through HubSco Plus. Again, formal advertisement of bids is not required for these projects. And there is a dollar value. The dollar value is not listed in this actual statute, but it's referred to another statute. And that's where the $30,000 up to $500,000 goes to. But there's some overlap in that $500,000. That's about bidding. But there's in the formal good faith efforts for Hub, that dollar value goes down to $300,000, and then in some places it references $100,000. It's a little bit convoluted. UNC School of Government recommends if you do anything over $300,000, treat it as a formal hub project. In that the owner has certain things they have to do, and the bidders do as well. That's not this set. This is for informal. For projects $300,000 and above, this is what the general statute talks about the public owners doing. So the local government needs to develop and implement a hub participation outreach plan, attend the scheduled pre-bid conference. That's usually pretty easy to do. I mean, you got to just make sure that it's scheduled and have somebody from the organization present. Notify interested hubs about opportunity to bid on a project at least 10 days before the bid opening. And that must include the date, the description of the work, which includes the date, time, and location where bids are to be submitted, the public entity's contact person for the project, where bid documents can be reviewed, any special requirements for the project, and utilize any other media likely to inform hubs of the opportunity to bid. And some of those other media could be you put it on the hub office website. If you happen to post in EVP and put your solicitations on EVP, they're automatically going to show up on the hub office solicitation dashboard. But if you don't use EVP to post your solicitations, we have a form on our website that allows you to post things up there. And it's fairly common. We typically have 400 or more open solicitations posted there at any given time. And primes will be able to post there as well. There are some minority media outlets, and we've got a listing of those on our website under business resources and minority media outlets. So you could reach out to them to place an ad with them. It doesn't cost any money to post with the hub office, but it would cost money to post with the minority media outlet. So just be aware of that. We want you to reach out to folks. We just don't want you to surprise when they charge you to put an ad on their website or in their publication. We've got a poll question. So we're going to ask for your input, and you should see a little question come up in Teams, and it is, please share your HubSco Plus experience. Beginner, 0 to 1 project entered. Intermediate, 2 to 9 projects entered. Expert, 10 or more projects entered. So we'll As people respond, we can see in the chat how that is going. I'm going to answer it as expert. I think I've done that many practice ones. I haven't done an actual ones. We can't really do that in the hub office. But we can do some training related ones that are not real so that we can understand what you have to go through to do your entry. So we've got a fair amount of beginners that have 0 or 1 projects entered, 61% of the respondents so far. Actually, a little bit more because I think somebody wasn't able to use the poll, so they put it in the chat. And if the poll is not working for you, feel free to put that answer in the chat. So thank you. That does help us in understanding who's present and your level of experience. Do really want to encourage the folks who are beginners to say, hey, what about this as we're going through it? Sarah asked a question earlier, and I would put her clearly in the expert category. She may not consider herself that, but I do. She asks great questions. And so I don't know why I felt the need to single her out, but experts have questions. So intermediate folks have questions, beginners have questions. Feel free to ask your questions. So HubSco Plus, to get into HubSco Plus, we have the login on our website in that construction page that I mentioned before, where we have the due dates. There's a link to HubSco there. And when you click on that, you'll have a user ID and a password. And once you log in, you'll see like a main screen, and it'll show all your informal projects and formal projects that are currently open. Once you finalize the project, it will fall off this list, but there's a way that you can see projects that are finalized in another way. This is just an easy way for you to see, hey, this project is still out there. We're going to have to enter in some data and finalize it at some point so it doesn't get lost. Typically, I think most of the people who are on this call already have HubSco access. It's theoretically possible somebody got forwarded a message and they don't actually have a HubSco user account, but we'll talk about how you get access to that in a minute or two. Here are some features of HubSco Plus. We still call them new features because it was just launched in, I want to say, June 2023. So we're a little more than a year into using HubSco Plus. It still feels new to me. So some of the things you can do now, you can search for vendors, hub and non-hub. And once you do, it searches the electronic vendor portal database. If they are in that database and you select them, it will populate all the information that is available into whatever form you're filling out for a vendor, and that includes their hub status. So all hub vendors that are certified, you will be able to find them. Angel, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So in the event of entering the projects, let's say we're building the schools. I'm with Durham Public Schools. Is the project considered the entire school or each component of what that bid was, or simply the full bid is the single project?
It depends a little, Angel. If it is possible that you may have a couple of projects going on in a school, a renovation that you have, like the music department is renovating, their area, and then the athletics group is renovating the locker rooms, and they were kind of done independently. I don't know how likely that is, but it's possible. So and there might be different levels of expertise that are needed for those types of projects. So you may put those out separately. And in that case, it's the same school. The work may be going on at the same time, but you would be reporting them in HubSco Plus as separate projects because they were so distinct. If you are doing a broad renovation or a new project, you're totally building this from the ground up. Um, it would be appropriate to have a single project, but you may have multiple contracts on that project. It's these days CMR is a little more likely than to have multiple primes on the contract, but it's theoretically still possible to have multiple primes, and you may have like somebody who is doing the structure of the building, and you may have somebody who's doing more of the outside work. And we've seen some very, very, very large projects where the CMR is, the one that's overall, and they have dozens of contractors underneath them. So it is possible that you could have one project and it covers a whole lot of stuff. And it's possible that you could have a couple projects, same school, but broken out because of just how that project was put together. So I think if you're thinking of like, we have this program going on and we need to renovate this school, there may be different phases of a project, and that might be a question of whether, so there might not be one answer, Angel. It's
Okay.
probably ideal if it's all together. But if it's like a 5-year project, you might want to say, okay, we're doing this gym renovation as a separate project. Okay, now the gym renovation is done. We're going to do this block of classrooms or whatever, and do that
Okay,
as a
I
separate
understand.
project.
I understand from that perspective. So more specifically, as we just finished building DSA, that is considered one single project.
I don't know what DSA is, but
Oh, well,
it,
if we did one huge 3-year project that it took that whole time, but it was a new build from the ground up. And you're
okay.
right, there are different primes for who does the work out in the dirt, and who readies the land, and who builds the structure, and who brings the furniture. These are all different primes and contracts. So is the entire build a single project?
In that case, I would probably suggest yes. And as we go through and we look at some of the screens, um, if I don't mention it, bring it up because there's a set in there about contracts. Um, and you could have multiple contracts on a single project. And that would kind of be where you have multiple primes, to do that. So if I don't make it clear by the end of this session, prompt me on that, because I'll try to remember it, but it's possible I may just get going and miss it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good question. So we've got to search for vendors. It'll populate whatever we have in EVP. There's 40,000 vendors in EVP. Doesn't mean that every construction contractor has registered in EVP, but it's a lot easier when they do. Um, so you might want to encourage folks to go ahead and register in there, whether they're hub or not. They can indicate what work they do, and public entities can search for them, primes can search for them, and say, I need somebody who does this thing, that it can help them be found and used. It also makes it easier on us from a reporting standpoint. Um, the vendor autocomplete for listed vendors. So once you find them, it populates a whole bunch of things. And it is now possible, if you entered in a project as formal and then you find out later on, I didn't mean to do that. That was an informal project. You can switch it. Previously, you didn't have the ability to do that. You would have to start from scratch, which really stinks if you've put in a lot of time to get that project started. But now there's the ability to say, oh, I made a mistake. let me switch that, and it'll switch it. There are some differences in fields from formal to informal. A lot of them are consistent, but there are some differences. So when you make that switch, you'll need to be aware that I may need to go back and enter something else in that I wasn't anticipating. For instance, on the informal side, it is required to enter in who you solicited. So whatever vendors, hub or non-hub, that you reached out to ask them to bid, you have to enter them in. That's not required on the formal side. But also the good faith effort affidavit, 10 good faith effort checklist is not required on the informal side. So there are differences there. A little bit of tips and tricks for logging in. There's a PDF on our website. You can go in there and look at it. And it's basically if you try to log in and it says your account is locked, we recommend waiting 2 hours and then coming back and probably shut your browser down and come back in and log in again. You can use the select forgot password once the 2 hours passed. If you really forgot it, you can try to log in again, but if it doesn't work, you can use forget password and you'll be able to reset your password. We do not have the ability to change passwords. Leslie and I do not have that ability. So it is all up to the user to be able to say, I need a new password or I forgot my password and use that feature. So those are our main suggestions there when it comes to doing that. And typically when you are first created as a user, your password will be your username. So the first time you log in, if you've never logged into HubScope Plus before, you'll use your username as your password. We will send you your username so that you'll be able to know that. All right. So the inbox, once you log in, you'll be able to see all the projects either for an entity or yourself, and it's possible to toggle back and forth between those to see what currently open projects are shown for you in HubScope Plus. And typically, I think it's the informals at the top and then the formals at the bottom. And you can look at those, you can edit them, you can delete them. You can't accidentally just hit the X and it just goes away. There will be are you sure you want to do this message that pops up. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I got to keep my mouse totally away from that. I'm going to something just by looking at it. It doesn't work that way. So you're protected from that. Megan, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm new to this position. Will this show anything outstanding for my location that somebody else has created, or is it just things that I've created?
When you log in, you'll if you see this screen that we're showing right here, there's a little red line all the way over here. It'll say show inbox, and in this case, it's for Penny Helms. It says that if it says show inbox for Penny Helms, that means the projects that you're looking at right now are for your entire organization.
Okay.
If it says show inbox for Union County Schools, that means Penny is just looking at her mailbox and she's only going to see the projects that she has created. But if you look at the ones that say it's for the whole school system, you'll be able to see everybody's projects that are open.
I can toggle back and forth for the whole school system versus my inbox.
Yes, right. Yeah. And this should be the ones that are currently open. There's another way to look for all projects, whether they're open or not. And you can, it's a search that you can do, but it's not from this screen.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. All right. So you'll be able to see all the projects from your individual login. So if you created them, again, this one is showing everything for that school system. But you'll be able to see anything on here can be edited or deleted. Okay, we're going to go to our next poll question. Let's see what this poll question is. I'm excited to see. We talked about what the poll questions would be, but I'm not running the polls, so Leslie's running that. So the holiday season begins the day after Halloween, Black Friday, December 1st, or 11:59 and 59 seconds on October 31st. Oh, yeah, I'll say Black Friday. I think I might be one of very few. All right, it's looking like the day after Halloween is doing pretty good. Somebody said Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Somebody said December 1st. All right. So looks like Halloween, once Halloween's over, all bets are off, and some of us will start decorating. Um, okay, let's go ahead and move on. Hopefully everybody is decorating for their holiday and making progress. I still got a lot to do at home. We're going to talk about HubSco administration, and this is not about entering data for your specific projects. This is about your accounts and your users. So to navigate through HubSco Plus, you use the menu at options at the top of the page, and you basically just hover over these three words: administration, projects, or report. And when you hover over administration, you might see public entity or send email. Um, that will not send it to everybody in HubSco. Leslie and I can do that. Folks in the Hub office can do that. But for each individual organization, you would only be emailing it internally. So you'll have to decide if that's useful to you or not. My guess is Outlook might be a little bit more practical for sending emails, but you have that capability. And public entity is really your details about your own entity. It's not necessarily the case that everybody will be able to see that because there are different levels of access in HubSco Plus. Project tabs. So if you hover over projects, you'll be able to see a main page, project inbox, search for projects. That's where if the projects are closed, you can find them. Or if you don't care if they're closed or not, and you just want to see everything, or if you want to see all the informals or all the formals separately, you can search that way. There's the ability to add new projects, whether they're informal or formal. And there's the no quarterly project submittal option. And that's only available to system administrators. If you're listed as a user, then you can enter data, but you would not be able to see this no quarterly project submittal. And we'll get to that in a minute. Then there's also a report tab for annual and quarterly reports. You can look at total construction dollars by construction method and by type of work as well. So system administrator screens. Every organization has somebody who is designated as their system administrator for HubSco Plus. And administrators can do certain things, just like every regular users. They can enter data, they can create projects, they can submit projects, and they can pull reports. But they can also make changes to their organization information and their users. So if you're a system administrator and you go to your public entity, you'll be able to see this. And this example is Union County Public Schools. If they wanted to see specific details about their account, the whole account for the school system, they would click on this little icon under Edit. If they want to look at their users, and that includes system administrators, they would click on this little meeple or icon in the lock system lock indicator there, and they would be able to see who in their organization is listed as a user or a system administrator and make changes there. So if they clicked on that on the edit portion, they would be able to see this, and they can change their address, the entity name, phone number. They can change their primary contact or their responsible official contact name. If you're looking for a definition of primary contact or responsible official contact, you're really not going to find one. It's fairly left up to who do you think is your primary contact, or who is your responsible official contact. It could be your CFO. It could be a project manager. A lot of times the people who report in on the projects are from the finance group. It doesn't have to be that way. If you have somebody who is a designated hub coordinator, MWBE coordinator kind of role, that person might be listed as one of the contacts, or that's fine. It's up to you to define that as to who should be those contacts. It's possible that it's the same person. In this example, it was Penny Helms for both of those. And there are some required fields, but we tried to, in the creation of HubScope Plus, cut down on the number of required fields so that we could move forward with creating new accounts as they're needed. We don't have everybody with accounts who should have accounts. There's 115 school systems, and we've got maybe 85 of them with accounts, and there's 100 counties, and we have probably about 60. So they can't even comply by reporting because they don't have accounts. And up to this point, it's been up to the organization to reach out to us and say, hey, I want an account. Even though the statute says you must report, there's people who haven't done what they needed to do to get an account. But we've made it easier to create those accounts. So, because previously we had some of the fields here, like the minority business outreach plan and the dates and the verifiable goals, those previously were required. And a lot of times people didn't necessarily know the answers to those. I mean, there should be answers somewhere to them. But for the purposes of reporting, yes, I want to make sure that they have those things, but we want to make sure that we're getting the reports in, and that we're able to show the actual information, the actual story of how hubs are being used in the state. Most of the goals will just be that verifiable percentage goal, a single goal of 10%. It can be a little bit different, again, depending on if there's any state funds. There had been some organizations that had goals by specific ownership categories. So there is the capability to do that. But typically, people will do either the verifiable percentage goal or percentage goal by category. And we don't see by category very often. All right. So the other thing that administrators can do is they can click on the user for a list of staff with HubScope Plus access, and they can add new users. If somebody is new to the organization, they can add them. They can edit existing users, and they can delete existing users. So sometimes people's names change, people's emails change, or phone numbers change. So you may have to do that. And other times people retire, or they move to a different part of the organization, and they're no longer responsible for HubScope Plus data entry. So you would delete those, or they've just left the organization entirely. The add and edit screens are just the same. It's just when you're doing add, it's all blank. When it's an edit, it will be filled in with all the information that was available there. Password will not be visible. You cannot access it at all. Security, choose between either public entity user, which is they enter data, they can pull reports, or the system administrator, where they can edit data and pull reports, or do all this other things that we were talking about. The other important thing that system administrators can do is the no projects quarterly submittal. And when it comes to annual report time, we do include how many times an organization submits their report. So their quarterly reports, the minimum is 0, the maximum is 4. And we post that publicly on our website so that people can see whether an organization was following the reporting requirements. And we do this so that, and we know because we had the example of a new school that took 3 to 5 years to build. You may not have a finalized project for a long time, but this capability to go in and say, we didn't have anything finalized this quarter is a way for you to get credit for reporting and also showing we know that there are requirements to do this stuff. We just didn't have any projects that finished up for us to report on. So that is a benefit to folks to use that. You do have to be a little bit careful about when to do it. If you do it between now and January 10th, it's going to say, okay, you had no projects for quarter 2 of fiscal year 24-25. But if you did it on January 11th, it's going to think you're talking about quarter 3. And January 1 is when quarter 3 starts. So you have 2.5 more months to go that a project had the ability to be finalized and be entered. So you want to be careful when to do that. You don't want to do it January 11th. You want to do it January 10th or a little bit earlier. So just pay attention to when the due dates are and don't hit no projects quarterly submittal right after that due date. So adding formal and informal projects, one of the key tips we're going to say is do not or only use whole numbers. Always use whole numbers. Don't put in decimals and 0.25 if it was a quarter of a dollar. And don't put in your commas. Those will be filled in for you. So instead of $25,000 0.00, just type in 25000 and then move forward. Okay. So and that can cause problems if you enter it one way on one screen and a different way on a different screen. That has caused problems since we went live with HubSco Plus. So that's one reason that we share this. So be consistent so it minimizes potential for error. For adding a project, there's a couple of different ways to do it. When you first log in and you come into your inbox, at the top of the informal projects piece, there's add informal, and then there's also the ability to add formal. So you would click the right one of those to select your new project. And we do encourage you to follow this flow. It'll make a little more sense when we show you the screens. But in your inbox, add formal or informal. It will immediately take you to the project main data entry screen. Complete that screen, and then move on to the primary designer screen. Complete that screen. For an informal project, you may not have a primary designer, so you could skip that. But if you have a designer, an architect, or an engineer on the project, then you want to fill that in first. And then once you've done that, move to the construction contract screen and enter in your contracts and your primes. You would need to enter in your contract first, and then enter in the contract solicited directly screen. That is required for informal. It's optional for formal, but that's everybody that you reached out to invite them to bid. Then you've got the construction contractor screen, and that's the contractor and any subcontractors you've got. Then you've got project view and finalized project. So this is the order that we suggest that you go in. There's a couple where you could skip around and do things differently, but we think this is just a little bit easier of a flow for you to make sure that you enter all the stuff that you need to. When you get when you click add, you'll come to the project main data entry screen, and there are some required fields in here, like the project name, project number, location of project, square footage, project value, state funds. And if you're looking at the screen, you may notice it says total square footage and then total linear footage. You only really need to use linear footage if you're doing like a laying some pipe for a water distribution or wastewater, and all you're doing is putting in pipe. If you are building a wastewater treatment plant from the ground up, you might have some linear foot for the piping, but you're going to have square footage of the overall project. If you are not doing any, if you're just doing piping, you would enter a 0 for the total square footage and then type in, the linear feet of the pipe that you're putting in. So linear feet is not required. Square footage is. So even if you don't have, if you're only doing pipe, you would still need to enter a 0 in for the square footage. And you have to indicate if there's any state funds or not. Some of the other the options at the bottom that you've got are to save the project, to reset it, which stays on this screen. It just blanks everything out and it doesn't save what you entered. Or you can cancel it and it throws away what you have entered on this screen and takes you back to your previous screen. Once you enter in the data, it'll show up like it is on the right side image on the screen, and you have the ability to edit that information and go back to your screen where you can change things, and then you can save it, reset it, cancel it, whatever you want to do. So that's project main view. And once you complete that, you'll see sort of some tabs up here. It'll say project, designers, contracts, project view, finalized project. You would be able to click on each of those tabs to go to them and do whatever it is you need to do there. Sherry, you've got your hand up. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah.
Sherry Souther.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My question is, like, we're replacing like fire alarm systems, which is a huge project in the school. How do you put the square footage on that? I mean,
I would think, I mean, you may have to do some thinking about that, but if you're doing an entire school, then I would choose the square footage for the entire school. If you're doing just like a few classrooms, then I would take the square footage for those classrooms and not for the entire school. It's if you decide to do it one way or the other, it's probably okay. It gives us a sense of how much space you're dealing with there, and the contractors that you select and the work that is indicated will let us know that, hey, this was fire alarm related. So it's not like they were tearing the whole building down and building it from scratch.
okay, yeah, that's my question. I mean, because the school, it is the whole school. The whole school's probably 100,000 square feet, but that's not really 100,000 square feet of wiring and stuff. So
yeah, I hear what you're saying on that. I wouldn't stress it too much. It's if you're doing the whole school, then 100,000 square feet is fine. Again, because of the type of work that you're doing, and that type of work will show up when you select your contractors. It should be evident that, yeah, this was a lot of wiring, but it wasn't necessarily, a whole lot of sheetrock or steel or anything like that.
okay, yeah. I just want to make sure because that's what I was thinking, but just wanted to verify.
Okay. We do have a comment from Sarah, Sarah Kirby, that they use linear feet for their stream restoration projects. So that's another use for that. Okay, so coming back to the project main, again, in the flow that we talked about earlier, once you do this, we would recommend you go to designers and make any change and work on that. So I want to see if anybody's got, before we move on to designers, and I do want to be mindful of our time frame. We started at 10:30 and we're at 11:42. So I might need to accelerate how quickly we go moving forward. I still want to make sure that we answer the questions you have and you get to see the screens, but I may try to just move a little quicker if I can. So this is searching and adding designers to formal and informal projects. It's going to look very similar, whether it's formal or informal. So there's not a big difference there. When you're adding a designer, you click on the designer tab, and then you would click on add new prime designer. And then it would open up a box or a screen that says company name, and this would be information that you would add there. This is a place where you can do a search for the company if you know that you're working with a particular architect, and I'm just going to use a hub architect. I know HH Architecture. If you put in HH here or HH space ARCH, if you don't want to spell the whole thing, and then you click search, it will find all the vendors that have that name, and then you can say, oh, that's the one I want, and select it, and it'll populate. We have heard sometimes that there may be multiples options to select for a particular company, and I believe that's because they may have either multiple locations or multiple contacts listed in HubScope Plus. And so you would probably want to choose the one that is either the one that you're working with or the one that is appears to be the main office. So you would enter your criteria, and I would recommend just putting in the company name. You don't have to go in and put the address and all that other stuff. The point of this search is that it will find it and populate it if it found it. If it doesn't show up in EVP, you can go back and enter that information. So if you want to search on state, you could do that, but I would recommend probably just sticking with the company name and then hitting search and not worrying about these other items. You can leave the other things blank. So again, this is how you would search. If you had selected ABC Designs, you would type in ABC, select ABC Designs, and all this stuff underneath it would populate it. And if there was no designer found, you can select Add New Designer. That means they weren't in EVP. So you could add a new designer and you could enter the data manually. And you would say, okay, here's the designer. And you would select the type of service and the discipline that they're doing. If you do it manually, ownership category will be non-minority and the ownership source will be not applicable. So if you had selected from EVP, that would pre-populate. If you do it manually, that will pre-populate too. It will just be non-minority. And then you would indicate the method that you use to solicit them, verbal, in written, both, and put in the original contract value. When you're first starting out, you might not have a final contract value. You can leave that blank, but you should have an original contract value. So you click save and you could move on from there. Before I move on from this slide, I do want to say the types of service are listed here on the slide. So if you've got the PDF, you may want to keep that handy. I don't know if you want to print it out or just have it saved and refer to it when you need to, but these are the different options that'll show up on the drop-down menu for type of service. And then here are all the disciplines that show up And then here are the methods of solicitation that you have available. Okay. Once you enter the data, it will show you what you put in. It will, if there are contract dates that are missing, those will be blank. And we ask that when you are done, you come back in and you fill this in, the start date, the end date, and the final dollar amount. Please go back and add that in. It's not going to prompt you to do that at the end of the project. So for designer, it will not prompt you. It will for construction, but not for designer. So please, when you're done with the project, go ahead and make sure that everything's entered in there for the designers. You can also edit what you've entered. You can delete this. Again, it's not a instant, I tapped it and it's gone. It will ask you, are you sure? And then you say yes, and then it will be gone. And you can add a consultant. The consultant, it might be a surveyor underneath the designer that needs to do something, or maybe a specific type of more specialized architect or engineer that they need. That would be a consultant to the designer. If you delete the primary designer, you delete all of their consultants. So be careful with that. Delete is a powerful tool, but it can be challenging, dangerous, or frustrating if you misuse it. Okay, so searching and adding construction contracts to formal projects. So this is, you've entered in the primary designer and any consultants, and now you want to move on to the construction portion. So you would first go to contracts up at the top of the tab, and you would add a new construction contract. And this is the place where you might have multiple construction contracts for that really big 5-year project. You may have a couple of primes on the project. This would be where you would enter those in, and you would do a different contract for each of them. So you would select that, add a contract. The contract description is totally up to you, as are the project numbers and project names. Hopefully they're logical. Hopefully they make sense in your organization and how you organize things, but we don't have a stake in that. It's totally up to you how you name those things. But you do need a contract description or ID. It might be the same as the project number or the project name, but you may have a different system, so you may call it something different. You'll need to enter the contract method of advertisement, like you did with the primes, or the designers, where it's published and electronic, both of them, or you just send an email, or you put it out publicly. I thought phone or verbal was an option, but maybe not. This might be a formal one, so that might be a difference. You would enter the bid opening date, contract date, notice to proceed, and contract completion. So it's possible that you won't have all these dates when you're first creating this contract, but you should by the time the project is done. And it won't let you finalize the project without a completion date here. So once you've entered everything in, click Save. If you made a mistake, you can reset it and start over. If you say, oh no, I didn't even need to do this, can cancel it, and everything that you put in there will go away. It won't be saved anywhere. So once you enter that in, it will show you what you've entered, and you'll have some actions that you're able to do. You can go back and edit what you just put in, or you can go to contractors solicited directly. Again, that's required for informal projects, but it is not required for formal projects. That might be a way for you to save some time, and you may not have, if it's a formal project, you may have just put it out publicly on your website, or published it in EVP, or put it in the newspaper, and that's how you advertise. You didn't reach out directly to anybody, so there wouldn't be anybody that you did solicit directly. Now, on an informal project, you have to include that, but on formal projects, it's optional. Then you also have the go-to contractors used. So that's who you contracted with and their subcontractors. And then you could delete the contract. And if you delete the contract, you lose the contract, and you also delete all of the contractors, subcontractors under that contract. So can be useful, just be careful with it. Solicited directly, when you click on solicited directly, you'll be able to add a new contractor that you solicited directly, and that could be hub or non-hub, because you should be tracking everybody you reached out to. And it would be similar to that designer, where you enter in the firm name and you search on it to populate what you can from EVP into here. And then you would indicate the type of work being done, the date they were contacted, how you contacted them, did they receive a quote? If they did, you could enter in the amount the quote was received. Not all of these are required items, but it could be useful to have. So that is who you reached out to directly, solicited directly. So that is, I picked up the phone and I called that guy to say, hey, can you give me a quote? Or I sent an email to that lady and said, I really want your firm to bid on this. Can you send me some pricing? That's solicited. A broad email to 200 vendors is not considered solicited directly. It's you reaching out specifically to a particular company and requesting that they join the bidders. You would enter your search criteria for your vendor based on the company name. If they're not in the list, you can add a new contractor and you can manually enter the information. After the solicitation portion, you can select who you actually used. And then you would go back under your contracts piece and say, go to contractors used, and select add new contractor. You'll be returned to the search menu for contractors, and you would do your search, select your company, it would populate, or you would add a new contractor and enter your information manually. And then it would say, okay, that's the contractor. And you would have the ability to add in the information about the project itself. And you can add subcontractors once you get to that point. I'm going to go back just a sec. I think, we may have missed a screenshot in here when you're doing the data entry for the contractor. If it's a formal project, it will list the affidavit A 10 good faith efforts, and you would select what they submitted on their affidavit A as their good faith efforts. So that's something that you would enter in there. You don't have to do that for the subcontractors, but all the other, most of the fields are the same for the subcontractors as they are for your prime, for your contractor. You'll notice under add subcontractor at the top, it says it's subcontracted to test contractor 1. That's just what we did when we were entering that in. And the contract description will show up there as well. So you'll know that they are a subcontractor to that prime. And you'll have to put in the firm name, city, state, original contract value, and contract date. But those other dates you'll enter in later on in the process, unless you're doing it after the project's done and you know it all. If you're starting out the project and you're entering the data at that point, you would probably only have the contract date. You might also have the notice to proceed date. Again, these fields are very similar to the prime contractor, but good faith efforts are not required for the subcontractor. When you enter in your contractors and your subcontractors, there is a column here. This was not in the old system, but it is in the new system. and it tells you who's the prime, who's the subcontractor, and who's the sub of a subcontractor. So this is called the tier here. And if it's 0, that means that is the prime. I keep trying to highlight that, but it's just a PowerPoint. So 0 means they are the prime, and 1 means that is the company that is the subcontractor to that prime. You'll also see an indication in the firm name, this little sort of like an enter arrow, and it will get longer the more subs of a sub you have. So if you had a second or third tier sub, that arrow would get a little bit longer, and the company name would be pushed over a little bit. So you can add subcontractors under the prime. You can actually add subcontractors under the sub as well. Do be careful, because we have had some folks who didn't mean to add a sub to their subcontractor, but they did it. And they had to end up deleting that entry for that sub of a sub and go back to the prime and add them as a subcontractor. So just be careful about how you're entering that data so that it's reflecting accurately what is going on with the project. Once you've entered all your information, and actually you can go to the project view at any time, it'll show you everything that you've entered. If you haven't entered everything, it won't show up. So it only can show what has been put in. But it will show all the fields that it has available to show you, so you can see how things are going. And you might look at the contractors used and say, yeah, that says ABC Construction, but where's the subcontractors? And then that would be an indication to you, oh, we got to go back in and add the subcontractors. Project view. Oh, so we just covered that. So finalizing formal and informal projects. Once you've entered in all your contractors, designers, subcontractors, you would go to finalize project. And this is the end stage. So you got to be sure that you're ready for that before you get to here and do that finalized project. One of my favorite things about HubSco Plus is this error page item. And I can totally understand from the perspective of somebody who may have spent a lot of time entering data in that they might just be like, I'm ready for this thing to be done. I don't need this screen telling me I did something wrong. But the good thing about it is it can tell you where an error was found, specifically what page it was found. So it'll say main project page, construction contracts for, it'll tell you specifically where it is, what the field is, the value that was in that field. Sorry, keep clicking the wrong thing. And then what the error is. And I especially like this when people reach out to us and say, I need help. I got stuck on this. I don't know what to do. If they send us a screenshot of this, this will help us out a lot. And we'll be able to say, oh, you need to go click on project. That says project main page. Actually, if you click on that where it says main project page, it'll take you directly to where the error is. I think it will even take you to the field that's the problem. So it might take you to final construction value. And in this case, the error is that it's 0. You're trying to finalize it, but you don't have a final construction value. You got to go and put a final construction value in there. And oh, by the way, it needs to match the final construction value from the contract or the prime. So you do have to be aware of that. But I mean, you don't have to stress too much about, did I do things right? This will tell you, hey, there's something that you need to do a little tweaking on here. It may not be a fatal problem. And usually it's not terribly time consuming to fix it as long as you have the information. It might be more time consuming to go find something that you don't have. But it will show you the specific error page, the field, the value. If it's blank, it means you didn't enter anything in, and you've got to put that in there. So you need to put in a bid opening date. You need a notice to proceed contract date, and you need a contract completion date. Once you do enter all those in, these errors will disappear. And once no more errors are there, it'll be done. And you can, once you figure out, once you create, once you correct all of those errors, you come to the finalized project. It will show you this and say, here's all the data. It will look very much like the project view. It's just at the bottom, it will say finalize project. It'll have a button for you to push, and you click finalize project, and you can move on. There's no way of coming back to edit the project after you've hit that button unless we unfinalize the project. And by we, I mean me, Roxanne Waller, or Leslie Thomas can theoretically go back in and unfinalize a project. You can't do it yourself. You've submitted it. This is your submission for this project. But once you do submit it, you'll see this screen, not the red piece, but you'll see all this other information that says project data was successfully submitted. It'll tell you the project and the project type and the project name. And it'll tell you all this information. It'll say, make sure you keep documents of all these items for, I think it's at least 3 years. So make sure you keep that. This is your woohoo, I did it screen. It indicates you've successfully submitted and finalized your project. Once you navigate away from this screen, you will not see it again. So I recommend strongly that you take a screenshot of this for your records, so that you can put it in your document file, your project file, and say, we submitted this. It'll show the date that it was submitted, and you can have proof that it was there. I don't know that somebody's going to come back and ask you that, but you've got it if you need it. All right. Okay. Yep. And keep your documentation for 3 years. So there are some reports available in HubSco Plus, and it looks like we're a little over time. So I apologize. We'll go very, very quickly here. And if you don't want me to worry about reports, we can skip that. You don't have to use the reports if you don't want to, but it'll give you your annual or quarterly information. It'll give you information on dollars per construction method and type of work. So, if it was if you want to know all the single prime projects you did, all the CMR projects you did, it will be able to show you that. And if you want to see, okay, how many of these were general construction, how many were paving or roofing or electrical, you can see that. Most of the time, it'll show up as general construction for the prime. But if you have some work that was more specific, it will show up there as well. Some tips when you're doing this, you enter the ending year of the fiscal year in here where it says fiscal year. So if you're trying to pull a report for fiscal year 22-23, you would enter in 2023 where it says fiscal year, because that was the end year of that fiscal year. Then you would select the type of project, and that means design or construction. Well, actually, that could be formal or informal. Often I don't even look at that. I'm just looking at totals. So you can choose all the quarterly dollars added up, or you can select quarter 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you can select whether you want construction or design. We typically look at those separately, and we do not add the design dollars to the construction dollars. Report an annual quarterly report. So you'll see the totals here. If you're looking for your hub total, it will be where this red box is. And each report that you have should have a total at the bottom that shows you the total amount for whether it was Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian, female, disabled, disadvantaged, or not non-minority. There should be a total down at the bottom of this. The screenshot just didn't capture it. And you should be able to create a spreadsheet of these so you can export it if you need it. You might need it for your own internal reporting or just to have as documentation. Either way, you can do these searches, these reports, and export that data. Looks like we have another poll question. I wonder what this one is. Let's see. Favorite holiday drink, hot chocolate or hot cider? Today I could use a hot cider, but normally I go for hot chocolate. So we got a lot of hot chocolates there. About a third, maybe a little less, are going for hot cider. All right. Very good. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. We do have some resources, and we have links. We have recordings that you can go back to our webinars, and you can go through like what we've done today. It will be posted eventually on our webpage. It's actually our YouTube channel, and you can go back and see what we did. There are some resources on our webpage. There's a welcome to Hubsco. There's informal project training. There's an informal project checklist and a formal project checklist. So you might actually want to print that out before you start your project, because it will tell you every screen what the fields are, so you can be prepared when you go into Hubsco Plus and do actual data entry for what you're going to be needing to enter in there. So that's a little thing that you can use before you even open Hubsco. You can gather all your data together and you can say, do I have that? Do I have that? And just go down the list and say, check, 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 check. I've got that. And if you don't have something, you can say, oh, I need that. Let me go find it. And then come back and enter it in. You may not need it all at once, but it will be helpful for you to understand what Hubsco is going to ask. Okay, we also have a couple of things on Hub construction requirements, and there's an example of good faith efforts. I believe that's an affidavit that's kind of marked up a little bit to say, you know, this is the kind of documentation we would expect to see for a particular good faith effort. We also have links to our annual and detailed reports and our construction expenditure reporting page where all the due dates are. So thank you very much for coming.